Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. It's your brother Bolo VNR. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on all those platforms you see on your screen. Donate, whatever you can do, but subscribe, hit the like button, comment, all that good stuff. Bolo TBV, Bolo VNR clips, Bolo VNR 2.0, all of my YouTube channels. Subscribe. So follow me on TikTok, become a fan club member, become a super fan club member, become a member on YouTube. The super chat is available, all that good stuff. Now, ladies and gentlemen, since we got that out the way, I was not able to listen to this in Parliament. So we're going to go into it. Let's get into it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak briefly in general support of the regulations. I mean, I don't think the direction can be argued with. And ultimately, I think elements of the work being done here strike to the heart of the work that we should do to affect ordinary Jamaicans and to help them to secure a future of dignity for themselves. Mr. President, there is, however, a right to express concern with the limited level of participation of our citizens in pension plans. The truth is that low participation in saving for retirement ultimately becomes like a cancer on the society. As people get into retirement with no ability to take care of themselves, ultimately become some version of a burden on the state and the generation or generations that follow them. Right? So it's something that we should be concerned about. So I mean, I don't think it's something that we should choose to seek to explain or, to jumble in numbers, the reasons for why there isn't a growth in the number of plans or there is a reduction in the number of plans. The number of people, as quoted by my senator colleague Anderson, 174,000 is the number, and that number should concern everyone. Let's not get conflated around the number of plans and so on as an explanation. In any case, to get to the meat of my submission here today, I want to recognize what some elements of this reform means for ordinary Jamaicans. With respect to increasing the limits by allowing for a broader range of eligible or assets to be invested in by pension funds, it creates diversification in the portfolios that our ultimate pensioners are investing in. And that's better, ultimately. There is the opportunity for stronger returns, better resilience, less concentration. If you look at how pension funds are invested in Jamaica, there are large concentrations. Most of the largest asset class is actually government of Jamaica debt. So this move will allow for greater diversification over time. And I think that matters directly for the workers and ultimately the retirees who are saving in these funds. And it matters, Mr. President, for the wider country, potentially. As articulated by Senator Anderson, billions of dollars are vested in these funds. And I said it in this House before when we were debating on the fiscal debates, that there are tremendous resources here resident in Jamaica waiting to be mobilized to invest in opportunities in this country, but constrained by the state of regulations, the state of laws, many of which are vestiges of a very different Jamaica. So, these are elements of the changes here will allow for greater investments potentially by pension funds in the real economy, in housing, in infrastructure, energy, productive businesses, other long-term projects. Those benefits can extend beyond just financial returns, but ultimately potentially to jobs, right, to improve services, to stronger communities, and more sustained economic growth. That's why, I unreservedly support directionally where we're going with elements of these regulations. The increasing the limit in private assets from 5% to 7.5 and ultimately to 10, therefore, is welcome.
Senator Morgan. Please, yes, but you got your opportunity and you made your point. So, what goes for the goose will go for the gander. All right?
Mr. President, I have...
Yo, Mr. That you there, see, man. Yo, the man is an absolute disgrace, man. Yo, me don't know, him wake up in the morning and feel good about himself. Honestly. How embarrassing.
No qualms with supporting progress. Right? I have no qualms with supporting progress, but I'm surprised that I am being lambasted for supporting some progress. Right? So, yeah, Mr. President, it's the move that I just mentioned begins to remove this long-standing restriction and restraint on the ability of pension funds to invest more in Jamaica and productive economic activity. And I wish to acknowledge, Mr. President, that these changes aren't happening in a vacuum. There has been sustained advocacy and technical engagement from the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica. That was mentioned earlier. I want to commend them. And the Jamaica Securities Dealers Association over many years, and other participants in the financial services sector who have consistently encouraged for more modern, flexible, and risk-sensitive pension investment frameworks. So, Mr. President, the reform, I think, is especially timely. Jamaica, Mr. President, is at a point where we're speaking about rebuilding and expanding critical infrastructure, increasing the supply of housing, strengthening our energy resilience, and financing other long-term priorities. And, Mr. President, I would have said here before that we need to create a framework where domestic capital can participate in this rebuilding and recovery and the creation of more capacity for resilience in our economy. And I'm happy now that the government has recognized that we need to move in this direction, and has said that this is the primary objective of the reforms. However, Mr. President, while pension funds and they manage substantial pools of capital should be well placed to participate in these opportunities, the amendment to increase the amount that pension funds can invest in private assets does not by itself change the way these assets are treated, and I'll explain. Right? And it does not by itself actually ensure that investments are going to be channeled in this direction. So there's an opportunity, Mr. President, for the government to be even more imaginative. A pension fund investment in a well-structured infrastructure or rebuilding project, for example, is still going to be placed in the same broad category as other private investments. So in other words, it's going to be placed in the same category as a private equity investment in a startup company looking to push some innovation. Those are two very different categories of risk. So you talk about creating a framework where pension fund assets can be channeled appropriately into the real economy, but there hasn't been any distinction with respect to the limits associated with the kinds of investments that better characterize what pension funds should be focused on and others. So in other words, the category of private assets appears to be a bit too broad. So while the limit increases the capacity generally, it doesn't by itself necessarily create all the flexibility that the pension fund may need to participate consistently and meaningfully in Jamaica's economy and ultimately the development agenda. And therefore, I commit, Mr. President, to this House that further reform needs to be contemplated and may well be necessary. Mr. President, I think the next step in this process should be developing a more practical and risk-aware framework that distinguishes between different categories of private assets, right, and allows for pension funds to access opportunities according to their actual characteristics and risk, rather than treating them all broadly in the same way. Right? That would be my constructive feedback to the government. Additionally, Mr. President, I must tell you that clear regulatory guidance around this is going to be important. Trustees and investment managers should have confidence as to how these kinds of assets, these infrastructure projects, project financing investments that may be a bit new to the space, are to be accessed, how they're to be valued, how they're to be monitored, etc. Because without that kind of clarity, you may find that the pension funds have the ability to invest in these things, but they remain cautious. The limit is there, but it is never used. Mr. President, we should also recognize that this amendment does not at all address the long outstanding second phase of pension reform, which was mentioned on that side. Just mentioned. And what wasn't mentioned is that this thing has been going on for almost 2 decades, right, without progress forward. And Mr. President, I will say that critical elements of ensuring accessibility, ensuring consistency in relation to pension coverage, adequacy, portability that was mentioned, governance, and a wider investment framework are contained in that reform. So if we are concerned about the level of participation, and everybody should be, if we're responsible citizens and policymakers, then why haven't we taken the tangible steps to advance part 2 of the reform? The broader reform agenda has been outstanding for far too long, Mr. President. So this reform, while it is welcome, appears tactical. It appears to be appealing to a present-day need, the need for greater participation in the economy. And I'll take it, but I would commit to the government to focus as well on the structural, the longer-term underpinnings of the pension system that will allow greater participation and really safeguard our citizens into the future. Mr. President, the benefits of doing this will go well beyond the financial sector, the pension funds themselves. I seem to be rousing a lot of discussion in the House, Mr. President. Greater participation can help finance infrastructure and housing, etc. That's great. But as I said, we can't lose the broader, more important principle that it is for the people who participate. So, Mr. President, I welcome the step forward, the incremental step forward with respect to the changes here in relation to the limit. My other colleague has spoken to another element of the change that gives us pause on this side. But notwithstanding that fact, this signals that we're moving in the right direction, and I would encourage us to get a little bit more granular through continued collaboration with those who have advocated for this for years. And I'd also encourage us to look broader at the more holistic reform that's necessary to safeguard or to help to safeguard the future of the people of this country. If it pleases you, Mr. President.
While I might not understand all the intricacies of what he was talking about, I do understand that there's talking about the pension plan, right? And I remember listening to Miss Keisha Anderson. She made the point that there's not a lot of Jamaicans that are secured. And what he's talking about, although the broader policy he welcomes, he's giving you scientific detail as to where needs to be tweaked for a more effective policy. And of course, Marlon Morgan, the ignorant one, has to jump up on that list. You have to know when to read the room, and he's the person that doesn't know how to read the room. I tell you already, if you don't know when to shut up. But let's get into another clip, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into this.
When I saw the agenda today, I said, well, I'll be able to come to the Senate and then leave quickly and go over to the Holy Trinity Cathedral for the funeral of Dr. Agri Irons. But then I realized this funeral started at 10 o'clock, so I could just watch some of it online. I didn't expect to be speaking in this debate. I didn't expect to, but I'm going to, because I can't go to the funeral again. So, President, I'm pleased that the issue of pension is being discussed in the Senate today. I'd have hoped that we would leave in here today saying both sides of the Senate concur on the need for pension reform, as well as in support of the amendments to the regulations. I'm disappointed. One speaker from that side spoiled the party. There's some things on which both sides of the divide can find common grounds. This is one of them. This is one of them. And let me say, ditto to everything that Senator Cavan Gill said. If from this sitting, the headlines become senators, trade union colleagues support call for workers to invest in pension scheme. That would be a good thing. But it's not just Senator Gale from the BIT and Lambert Brown from the UAW. It is all the senators saying to the Jamaican people, we need to look out for old age. We need to prepare for old age. Because I can tell you, Senator Morgan, it does come around.
Yes.
Just look at me. It does come around. So, it is clear to me that the pensions is such an important thing if our country's stability is going to be maintained. Because without money to invest long term and to transform the country, it's going to be poverty. And that is why a couple of years ago, I moved a resolution in this. I tabled a resolution about pension and about saving. Unfortunately, it fell out the other paper and we never debated it. Today is a good opportunity to raise and re-raise some of those issues. Senator Gale, people like Hugh Lawson Shearer, Alexander Bustamante, Michael Manley, Carlisle Dunkley, Upton Cable, the trade unionists of the past were champions of pension schemes. And most of the workplaces came to have pensions because the trade unions in our collective bargaining agreements had placed the issue of pension. A lot of it against the employers' wishes. So one of the strongest pension scheme in the country today is the cable and wireless pension scheme. There was a time, Senator Hill, when we would deal with that because that's still active. There was a time, Senator Hill, when cable and wireless had thousands of workers employed to them. That scheme is, cable and wireless probably have less than 500 employees today. But that pension scheme, built over the years, is probably one of the strongest pension schemes in the country. You want to give you an hint of one of their investment? Just up where Not So the Express is in New Kingston. That property there, which I just use for parking, and which bring in a whole pile of money for them, is part of a long-term investment. I'll tell you something about parking, Minister, because I think it's important. I had to visit your hospital, Senator Thompson, Spanish Town, and I look and say, where do people park? And they have to go to some other hospital somewhere. And I realized that in our hospitals, there's no parking. In fact, at KPH now, doctors are parking out on the road. And so, investment in parking may very well be a lucrative source of income. And so, consistent with what Senator Ferguson said, opportunities do exist. And regulations that may limit it is what we need to address. So I'm proud of the role the trade unions have played. And as the workforce shrink from collective bargaining arrangement to more individualistic arrangement, we see the danger of contract work. Because contract work, one reason why they brought in contract work is to get around things like pension. And the people who get into contract work see it as a 6 months, a 3-year maximum, and don't understand that there's going to be a long-term life. And so things like the individual retirement scheme becomes important. So from this Senate today, let the call go to all Jamaican workers, to young people, of the importance of saving. Saving for a rainy day. Saving for an old time day. Because old time day do come. Minister of Education, I grew up in an era where they had something called penny bank. And I grew up in an era where we had a National Saving Commission. Penny bank. Penny bank. So maybe, Minister, within the education system, we need to revisit the financial literacy is, if you want to call it big word, I like those big words, but the concept of getting our kids from kindergarten, from primary school, from prep school to start the habit of saving. Because if they start it there, it becomes easier as they grow further. So it is important that we pension in the old way may not be around. But if we look forward and encourage our kids, and Senator, you know us, I know of this habit, can't talk too loud for the parents here, to try and give my grandchildren, 2-year-old, 5-year-old, and so forth, to give them some, and to say to their parents, get a bank account for them so I can put some things in it and encourage them as they grow older to save. I don't want them to be as poor as I am. I want them to be wealthy. And that comes from learning the idea. You know I'm not doing that. I'm allowing him to talk. He wants more time. So that, no, I can't wrap up while he's there. So I want to make it clear that saving is so important that if we get back to encouraging the children and showing workers, because it's not an easy struggle. Senator Gale will tell you, when you go to the sugar workers, for example, and you negotiate for sugar workers, and you tell them that we want to get a pension scheme or an insurance scheme, they tell you they want the money now. And they can't afford them because things tough now. But we have to encourage people to see long term and to understand that a decade from now is not as long as you think. And having lived through many decades, I realize that decades do come and pass. So I want to encourage from this floor for people out there listening to take into account what Senator Gale said. Take into account what all the other speakers, except Senator Morgan, and to see that we can all concur, we can all agree, we can all support the need for saving. And then I can't end without saying that one thing I've learned is that government commitments are too slow in materializing. I'm talking about governments in general. Senator Ferguson spoke about 2 decades. Shoot, it's longer than that. We have been talking about government pension and that the workers must contribute, and thankfully, the unions have encouraged our members in the public sector, Senator Gale, to contribute. But the government made a commitment that they too will contribute to the pension scheme in the I hope so. But essentially, the government is supposed to contribute. But the government said, well, we will do so when certain things happen. And those things seems never likely to happen. So the type of pension scheme on the phase 2 we're looking forward to is not there. And President, as I said, this morning I thought to myself and said, you know, Senator Brown, the cutting off of microphones has happened. The guy is gone from the 32 Parliament. When Parliaments cut off speakers, it doesn't silence them.
All right, Senator,
It makes the issue bigger. So that, and this
Senator Brown, you know, no, but Senator Brown, hold on, man, just take it easy, man. Yes, please. Yes, man, but the road that you want to go down, we don't need, you know that you started off well by saying that, no, some of you want to go down a road and I'm not going to facilitate that this morning. All right? So please, all right?
This resolution is limited to 2 items. But you have allowed the discussion to go wider. You did. You allowed the discussion to go wider. And that's good. That's part of the democracy. As against, when we raise an issue and people get up on points of order to try and limit what can be said. So that when we engage in robust discussion, especially on issues on which we can agree, there's going to be dissent. There's going to be disagreement. I had to say to somebody recently, I'm going to outsource all my speeches in the Senate to them so that they can write what they want me to say because they want to hear what they want to hear. So as I close, I thank you for allowing the discussion not to be limited to these 2 points, but to allow the robust call of the entire Senate, bar one, for people to save and to invest so our country can be rich and prosperous. And on that, when I saw that,
Why may I tell us I'm happy, appreciate Lambert Brown, man. You know, him very, very crafty and skillful in how him doing things, you know. Because and that's why them not really like the PMP in the parliament. Because they are too good of an opposition. They feel them here David and them know how to bring the issues them to the fore. And this conversation around pension is very, very important. If you really look into Jamaica, Jamaica doesn't have a safer later plan. Most of you them just are live for right now and hey, you know, nobody now really look for live for sick. Now we're not looking forward to anything. We're not looking forward to growing old and having grandchildren and none of that stuff. I'm not looking forward to it. It's just the truth. It's just the mentality of the people, and it's about the environment that they're in. We don't see anything to be hopeful for. If I'm being 100% honest, in most of the cases, them they don't see it. That's why so many people is leaving Jamaica. You understand? Where other countries where they have serious pension plan, people can think about retiring and really like going on vacations every year. They can afford a certain amount of vacation because of their retirement plan. You know what I mean? You know, multiple options of investment. Here in Jamaica, everything is restricted. It's like we're still, the system itself and the governance entities don't want to bust the gate and let through the people in. We have to scrape. There's still remnants of slavery there. Keep them in check. You know, don't let them know the good life. And to God, let me know what you guys think in the comment section, man. Shout out to Mr. Ray. What's his name again? Hold on. Let me show some get the general. Senator Ramon Small Ferguson, yes. And Mr. Lambert Brown. Salute to them. Salute to them.